Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nat Friedman, CEO and co-founder Xamarin.
Wow. Look at this stage. You can't actually tell from out there, but this screen is entirely made of iPhones. So this morning, we have some really awesome announcements to show you all, and I'm really excited to get to those. But before we do, I want to tell you the story of how Xamarin was born. It starts a long time ago, actually. Sometimes I like to say that Xamarin is an overnight success that took about 12 years to prepare. And Miguel and I, this is actually our second company that we've started together. The first one, 10 years ago, we worked on together, we worked really hard, and nothing to do with Miguel, but after 10 years of working with him, I decided I needed a long vacation. So I took some time off. My wife and I, we put all our stuff in storage, and we got a backpack, and we got some flip-flops and 2 pairs of pants, and we went traveling. And it was awesome. We went to all kinds of countries. And at one point, we found ourselves in Cambodia. We have someone from Cambodia. That's great. So if you've not been, it's one of the most interesting countries in the world. There's Angkor Wat, one of the coolest ruins you'll ever see, ancient civilization that died there. But it's also one of the poorest countries in the world. It's in the bottom 20 countries for GDP. So after we'd seen the temples and the ruins, we heard about this lake near Angkor Wat. And on the lake, there was a floating village that had been constructed there. And basically, people had taken rafts, and they'd built these little houses on top of them. And they just floated them out in the water, and they tied them together. And they'd get around by boat. And it turns out you can go there, and you can visit, and someone will take you into the village by boat, and you can just sort of see how people there live, and it's really interesting. And of course, they have no plumbing, right? Everything comes out of the water, and everything goes into the water. And they have no electricity. But as we're sort of boating around this area, we're going from raft to raft, I looked inside one of the houses, and it was dark, but I saw something really familiar. I saw somebody kind of crouching down with a Nokia mobile phone playing Snake. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I realized, wait a minute, they don't have any electricity here. How is he charging his phone? So a little while later, we're heading back. We're taking the boat back towards the shore. And coming in the opposite direction, we see this canoe. And there's just one guy in the canoe, right? And it looks like it's heavy. It's sort of riding low in the water. And he's like really struggling to paddle the canoe. And as we come up on him and we start to pass, I looked into the hull of the boat, and it's full of car batteries. And then we watched this guy go from raft to raft, and he would drop off a fully charged battery, and he'd pick up a depleted one. And he was the electrical utility there. And I think this is really interesting because, of course, it shows the lengths that people will go to have a working phone and to text people and play Snake and all that. But to me, as I started to think about it, I got really inspired because I realized that right now, those are Nokia feature phones that you can play Snake on. But in a really, really short period of time, they're all going to be smartphones, right? Every person on the planet will have a smartphone. And it'll be a little computer in your pocket. And that means we'll all be able to have Wikipedia in our pocket. Or we'll all be able to have access to the same services in the poorest countries that people have access to in the richest countries. So that just seemed like an incredible future that we're definitely going to live in before we know it. We won't even remember what it was like before then. So this was really exciting. I was thinking about this. A little while later, I heard from Miguel. Now, while I was sort of slacking off in my flip-flops, it was cold in Boston. He was hard at work. And I got a text from him. He'd been working on mono. And he said, awake? Need some advice. And so I called him up. And Miguel said, Nat, without going into details, something has happened with mono. And we have a big opportunity. Now, Miguel and I had started a company together before, and we knew we wanted to do it again. We talked about it for years, and we had a Google Doc with ideas for our company in it, what we would do next. But it was pretty clear what we were going to work on next. We were really excited about mobile. So before I knew it, in fact, about 48 hours later, I was back in Boston. And Miguel and Joseph and I spent like an entire summer working out of coffee houses. We were kind of a mobile company from the very first day. They'd kick us out of the Wired Puppy, which was really have a very good iced coffee if you're in Boston. And then we'd go to the basement of the Starbucks, and we'd work there for a while. And we knew we wanted to work on mobile. We knew that today there are over 2.6 billion mobile devices, but soon there'd be 7 billion. Every person on the planet would have a mobile device. It used to be that a phone identified a location, right? You have your home phone, you have your office phone. Today, a phone identifies a person. It's part of who we are, right? So this would create a huge demand for mobile software. But what would we do in the mobile world? Like what, we knew that was also pretty clear to us because we knew we weren't just going to be writing apps, right? That's not exactly who we are. It's not in our DNA. If you look at the mobile space today, you can sort of, let's take Apple, Google, and Xamarin, right? Apple is incredibly focused on building gorgeous and amazing user interfaces, and they're great at it. They build the best user experiences in the world for users, right? Google, with their Android strategy, it wasn't about the best user interface, at least not at the beginning. It was about ubiquity, right? They built an operating system that was free. Any Asian hardware manufacturer could just take it and bundle it on a phone and ship it. But who was focusing on the developer? Well, we decided that that was what we were going to do. We were going to focus on delighting developers every step of the way to their mobile app. That was what we were excited about doing. So, of course, this idea of delighting developers extends to everything we try to do, including this conference, which is why we're so excited to have 630 people here at Evolve. I just checked. We have almost 1,000 people on the live stream right now, so there's a huge, huge community of people listening in. And one of the things that to me is so exciting about this event, and really unique, is that we're bringing together people who are really different. We have new mobile developers who have just spent their first 48 hours learning to write mobile apps. We have veterans who've got hit apps on the App Store who are making they're living off of apps, and we have people building incredible enterprise apps too. But we also have component vendors, people who are making user interface controls and charts and mobile backends. We have really excellent consulting companies who can help you build a mobile app. And then there's us. There's the Xamarin staff, right? We're the guys who are building the platform that you're using, and it's really rare to have all these groups come together. And the other thing I want to say is we have a totally new group of people here today that didn't exist yesterday. Let's give a big hand for the first 400 Xamarin certified developers who went through the training. Congratulations. You are Xamarin class of 2013. You're the first ones. Thanks for going through our training first. We're going to keep doing this. You'll be able to say you were there first. We'll have thousands before you know it. OK, training was only the beginning of the conference. We also have an awesome program set up for you today, including 2 great keynote speakers. Many of you know Scott Hanselman. Scott is a Microsoft program manager. He's a prolific blogger, and he's really he's a voice for developers. He's a podcaster. He's amazing. If you don't know Scott, you're going to find out this afternoon when he gives his keynote. And then tomorrow, Josh Clark is speaking in the morning. He's going to open the day. Josh is the author of my favorite book about designing mobile experiences, Tapworthy. And he's giving a talk about what it takes to build a great mobile UI. So you don't want to miss that. Now, in addition to the keynotes, we have tons of sessions. We've got 55 sessions. We've got 40 speakers. We have 5 tracks. It's kind of ridiculous. So don't worry, though. If you miss something, we're recording everything. It'll all be online, and it'll be free. So you'll be able to see all of that. Now, if you want to contribute, we have a chance for you to do that, too. We're offering 2 different lightning talk sessions. So if you've never done a lightning talk before, they're awesome. It's like a 5-minute talk. It's really easy. You get up, you show something you've been working on, an app that you've got, or maybe you figured something out you think other people can learn from. And what's great for me about attending lightning talks is that if you don't like what's going on right now, if you're bored, you just wait like 2 minutes, and then it's over, and the next one's up. So it's really nice. And then because we have our whole team here, we got 70 developers here. We're here for you. I mean, we could just stay at home if we didn't want to talk to you. So we've instituted a system of one-on-ones so that if you have a question, you don't want to just catch someone in the hallway, but you want to sit down and look at a problem or get your code debugged, you can spend some time with us. We've actually done over 75 one-on-ones already in the last 2 days, and we're going to try to fit everyone in. So please find someone in a blue shirt today if you want to do a one-on-one, and we'll set it up. Now, outside this room, I think a bunch of you guys saw last night the Darwin Lounge. The Darwin Lounge is chock full of toys and fun stuff to play with. But we also have the Mini Hacks Challenge there, where we set up seven different little coding challenges that you can do. And with each challenge, they're really easy. Most of them are easy, actually. They're sort of step-by-step walkthroughs, and they take, on average, about 10 or 20 minutes to do. And in each one, you get to add a cool feature to a mobile app, and so then you'll know how to do that, right? So you get to add, for example, barcode scanning to your app, or you get to add a mobile backend like Parse or Azure Mobile Services, or a really nice user interface control. Each time you finish one, find a blue shirt in the Darwin Lounge, show it to them, and you'll get a sticker. These are like merit badges, and you stick them on your badge. There's little, on the back, there's little circles where you put them. Hard to see in the light here, probably. And once you've collected 4, you win a Xamarin Power Pack. So this is really cool. It's like a really big battery with 2 USB ports on it. They're actually huge. You can recharge an iPhone or like a Galaxy S3 6 times on it, I think. So they're really useful. A few people I've seen already have them. And so the Darwin Lounge is 24 hours. You can do your mini hacks anytime. OK, tonight, after all the talks, we have a party. It's across the street in Brush Square Park, literally like right across from the hotel. And it's going to be really fun. Austin is known for its food trucks. So we're bringing in 7 like gourmet food trucks, and everyone's going to be able to choose their food and sit down outside. It's going to be like a real Austin thing. And then we've got games. We've got Rock Band. Microsoft has sponsored 3 Rock Band stations, which is cool. We have Giant Jenga, which was what we call it in San Francisco. And here in Texas, it's just called regular Jenga. And we've brewed this cocktail called the Zammy Whammy, which you can try as well. So this conference wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. And we're especially grateful to Microsoft, who very early took the lead position as our exclusive platinum sponsor. Microsoft has a lot of people here. They're doing 2 talks on Azure Mobile Services and on Visual Studio. So you don't want to miss those, and check out their booth outside. So I'd like to have a big hand for Microsoft and all of the sponsors who made this possible. Now let's look a little bit at what Xamarin has accomplished in the last 2 years. Today, we have nearly 300,000 developers on the platform, and we're adding more than 1,000 a day. It's amazing. This was about 500 a day before we released Xamarin 2.0, and the number's doubled now. Altogether, we have over 15,000 paying customers from 70 different countries, including some you'd never expect. And to me, I think one of the most fun things about working at Xamarin and doing a platform instead of writing apps is, and nothing against writing apps, but we get to see all the apps that you write. And the variety is amazing. It's not just one type of app that people are building on Xamarin. We have every category of app. There's one of my favorites is iCircuit. It's an education app. It was written by Frank Kruger, who's here somewhere. Everybody knows Frank. iCircuit lets you design circuit schematics with your finger on either an iPad, Android, or Windows device. It's awesome. And then you can press play and simulate the circuit and even drop an oscilloscope probe on and see the waveforms. It was featured in the Apple retail stores. And if you want to know what that does to your App Store sales, ask Frank. He can tell you. It's pretty interesting. I have a friend who's a physics professor at a university on the East Coast. He says all his students use it. It's incredibly widely used across the whole industry. We also have a lot of people, and I'd say the majority of you here today, who are building enterprise line of business apps, including Kimberly Clark, who built a beautiful field sales app. And what I think is especially interesting about it, it's for selling medical devices. And what I think is really cool about it is that it's sort of an example of one of the things that's happening in enterprise software right now, which is that it's getting less crappy. enterprise software is not known for its gorgeous visuals and excellent usability. But on a mobile device, that doesn't fly anymore, right? On a mobile device, people just have higher expectations. And so there's this consumerization of enterprise apps that's happening, and it's really fun for us to see someone incorporating animations to make an enterprise app more usable, or incorporating great visualizations. And of course, they're also incorporating elements from games. And we have some awesome games on Xamarin, and many of them on Monogame. Bastion is one of those. Big hand for the Bastion guys. Bastion is a really interesting story. They were a hit iPad app, and Wired called it the best ever tablet conversion. And that's because Bastion actually began as an Xbox app. It was written in C#, and they decided to move to iPad. And because they had all this C# code that they'd already written using XNA, they could reuse all that. They didn't have to start from scratch, and they had extra time left. So they could spend that time making the tablet user interface really amazing. So it has a cool touch interface for a game. It's really, really beautiful. The guys who wrote Bastion are called Supergiant Games. They're from San Francisco, and they're here today or tomorrow. So you should see them talk. It's going to be pretty great. OK, and then finally, of course, we have broad consumer apps, including consumer media apps like Rdio. Anybody here from Rdio? All right. Rdio is my favorite music streaming service. It's pretty great. You can stream, once you subscribe to Rdio, you can stream any music you want to your phone, to your tablet, to your desktop. They've got this really cool feature in it where you can be playing music on your desktop, and you can control that from your phone. So it's like a remote control, and you can switch which device you're playing on. So it's like the Sonos media system, if you know it, but it comes with Rdio. It's great. I think what Rdio's done with their app is they've achieved the holy grail of mobile apps that are cross-platform, because it's a really beautiful user interface. It's smooth. It's got all these great sliders, et cetera. But they're sharing 50,000 lines of C# across iOS, Android, and Windows. So you look at this thing, you would never know. You would never, ever know that Rdio was written in C# when you first look at it. But when you do, it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's a completely native app. We have a lot of customers here. And you may have noticed that we have over 40 engineers here from National Instruments, which is headquartered here locally. National Instruments, everybody from National Instruments, let's hear it for you. National Instruments is a hardware and software company that creates tools for scientists and engineers to help monitor systems and buildings and objects and automate the world around them. And if you've ever taken an EE class in your life, then you've used LabVIEW. I've used LabVIEW. A bunch of us have. It's like it's all come full circle now because we're now providing technology to LabVIEW. It's pretty awesome. And then we have, out in the Darwin Lounge here, some Lego Mindstorms. And National Instruments software powers Lego Mindstorms as well. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage David Fuller. He's the Vice President of Application and Embedded Software R&D for National Instruments. Come on, David. So David, tell me about National Instruments and what you're doing in mobile.
Sure. As Nat alluded to, we're a hardware and software systems company. Hopefully some of you guys have used LabVIEW in your engineering education. Fundamentally, our goal is to be a tools provider to scientists and engineers. We're also a platform company. The platform we give you is this hardware and this highly programmable graphical language. The engineering challenge that we're trying to achieve is to service what we call kindergarten through rocket science. In partnership with Lego, we provide tools that allow children to program simple Lego robotics. But we're also at the heart of the most complex instruments on Earth, like the CERN Hadron Collider, and we're also mission control for companies like SpaceX.
That's great. Tell me about the iPad app that you built.
So we built an app that essentially takes the front panel or the basic visualization elements that you would want as a scientist, graphs, knobs, charts, whatever, and allowed you to interactively drag and drop and construct an instrument panel that reflects the state of your experiment or the lab or where the beam is at in the Hadron Collider and so on.
What is it that National Instruments likes about Xamarin?
We like so many things about Xamarin. No, the number one thing that we like is, and this is a little bit of props and credit to Microsoft, we absolutely love the .NET stack. We love the C# language and its design and the tooling around it. So the number one thing we love about Xamarin is they've allowed us to leverage that expertise and skill that we've built up over the years in C#, and then take that and get us broader reach onto more platforms that are certainly coming out, particularly in the mobile space. And from our point of view, with LabVIEW, it is a graphical language. It's very direct manipulation in its origin, coming off of the Mac. And we fundamentally believe that long-term, it's one of the most touch-ready programming languages on the planet.
David, pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the conference. So we got a lot of great customers here, but we also have a lot of great partners. And I'm really proud of what we've done at Xamarin with our partner network in the last 9 months. We went from 0 to over 50 partners worldwide. These are all consulting companies that are expert at mobile and that have a lot of experience building apps with Xamarin. And it's really great because wherever you are in the world, if you need help, if you need an expert on Xamarin, one of these partners can help you. One of the partners that we have here today, and many of them are here, and one of our best partners is Cognizant. Cognizant is one of the largest systems integrator companies in the world. They have over 150,000 consultants, and they're one of our premier partners. So my next guest is Jeff Wallace. He's the practice leader for mobility at Cognizant. Jeff, come on up. Good to see you. Jeff, tell me about Cognizant and what you see in the mobile space today.
Sure. So Cognizant is, as you said, a very large global systems integrator with 150,000+ employees, and we have a very, very active mobility practice of over 900 dedicated mobility architects, developers, consultants, et cetera, working with clients globally around the world on their mobile strategies, all the way through implementation and integration of their mobile applications.
What types of mobile apps have you been building lately, and are there any trends that you see lately in the mobile area?
You know, for Cognizant, we work across a number of industry verticals. So we work across banking and healthcare and life sciences and communications, entertainment, really across a very, very wide spectrum. So they can be fairly simple applications, either a B2C type of an application for a retail client, or they can be very, very complex enterprise applications with deep integration into back-end systems.
Excellent. Jeff, what brought you here to Evolve today?
We are, we work across, as I say, very broad spectrum of clients, and we are very, very excited to work with Xamarin to be able to bring the kind of high quality, high performance, high fidelity kind of applications that we can produce. We have a lot of C# developers in our 150,000+, so they're extremely excited about working with Xamarin. So we're just super excited to work with Xamarin and learn more as you guys are growing.
Excellent. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Jeff.
Thanks.
All right, are you guys ready? There's a lot of good things about working at Xamarin, but I think my favorite is that I get to work every day with my best friend, Miguel. So it's an honor for me to welcome to the stage our co-founder and CTO, Miguel de Icaza.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I want to talk a little bit about, continue with the theme that Nat had today, about delighting developers. In the first company that we created, we actually built a very large and ambitious project. It was written mostly in C and C++, and this was a project that we eyeballed to be about 6 months worth of work. We had very competent programmers. We understood the space. We knew what to do. And we had good engineering practices. And what happened was that it was built in C back in the day, around 1999. That was probably a good choice. There was really nothing. There were no high-level languages that were performant enough for the hardware of that time. And the problem is that this 6-month project actually turned out to be a 2-year project. And it ballooned from having 6 developers to 17 developers. And the problem was that we're fighting all of these problems with C. We're having memory leaks, crashes, memory corruption problems, race conditions, all of these things that a low-level language has. And roughly around this time, Microsoft published the specification for C#. And I was quite puzzled by the specification. It seemed to address every single concern and every single problem that we had with building low-level languages, but it also combined it with the performance that we needed. So it was a blend of performance and high-level development. So I decided to learn the language and see if the language really delivered on the promise. So my first C# application was actually a C# compiler. So I wrote a C# compiler, which is a compiler that you're using today. Although now better developers maintain it. And at the end of the day, I could not believe how good this was. And I wanted to continue building software using this language. I didn't envision a future without C#. So we decided to implement Mono. We decided to build Mono for that reason. We wanted to have that functionality available on non-Windows platforms. So we initially brought it to Linux, and it's today the foundation for everything that we're doing on Android, macOS, and iOS. So that was my first. I mean, that had a very big impact in my life. It was. Like I like to say, life is too short to debug another memory leak. Life is too short to debug another memory corruption problem. There's just no point to it. There's really just no point to it. And C# really fixed these problems for me. I'm now an old man. You might not tell because I use everything that the cosmetic industry, modern cosmetic industry has for me in store. Clarence, really good. But now I have a daughter, and I'd rather spend time with my daughter than chasing another Heisenbug because some malloc went wrong and I forgot to free a pointer or something like that. So that was a life-changing event for me. And I like the static typing nature of C#. I like the IDE to do half of the work for me. I like IntelliSense. I like code completion. I like the tooling to fix the bugs for me, or prevent many of these problems from happening in the first place. So I love the language. I might be biased because I've been using it for more than a decade now, but I absolutely love it. And this is the foundation for a product. I've had many happy moments in my life, but the second delightful event that happened was we had all seen the Steve Jobs keynote on the iPhone, and at the time I was a Linux guy, and I looked at that and I said, well, it looks pretty, but and then the demo started. I was like, this is very nice. This is very good. Oh, look at that scrolling. And I was thinking in the back of my mind, how are we going to get that on Linux? Because I was a Linux guy at the time. So I resisted it for a long time because I'm a Linux guy. So it's like, no, I don't need that stuff. I'm going to use the Linux-based phone whenever it comes out. But eventually I said, you know what? I've been working in open source for a long time. I'm going to give myself a little present, right? Not too much. I'm going to get a Mac, and I'm going to get an iPhone. It's just a little thing. It's like dessert. It's like a little, it's like, I shouldn't, but, I'm going to get the chocolate cake, the triple chocolate cake. So I got the iPhone after about 1.5 years of resisting. Right? It's like, no, that's not good. It's hype. It's marketing. But I got my iPhone, and I could not believe how good that was. I could not believe how good that was. And so I had these two loves now. I had iPhone on the one hand, right? This little portable device, this computer, this incredibly powerful computer that I could bring anywhere with me. And I've been dreaming since I was a kid to be able to bring a little computer that I could program and do some things with it that would let me access the world and do interesting hacks everywhere. So these two worlds were out there, and I wanted to bring them together. So we started this effort to bring these two platforms together. We started this effort to bring C# and iOS together, and now Android, and now the Mac. So we wanted to share that with you. We think it's a fabulous development platform, and we thought that everybody that loves these two platforms, this mobile world and this C# world, would like it very much. So, like Nat said, when we started talking on 2011, when I sent him that SMS message, and actually we both have a screenshot of that initial message when I called him up. He was I think he was in Cape Canaveral watching the last shuttle go off. what happened in the next few days, as we were talking, and I talked about this opportunity with Mono, is we knew that Mono was a good and solid foundation, and we liked what we had. But I came from a Linux background, and kind of the level of Mono at the time was Linux desktop level. And I had, for years, I've been very jealous of the good taste that Nat has, of the level of polish that he puts in the applications. He created a lot of beautiful work in the last few years. So he had a skill that I didn't have. And as we were talking about this, I said, well, Nat, this is what we have. We have MonoTouch. It's a fantastic technology. But we need to go beyond that. We need to go beyond that. So while we published the project right away in 2011, and we started cranking right away, that was not the goal. We had a big vision on those initial 2 phone calls. No, it was like a dozen phone calls in those 2 days about what we would do. And our goal was really to delight developers. I told Nat, what we want is I want our tools to be object of desire. We wanted people to feel an emotional connection to our tools. We just didn't want a compiler. We just didn't want some tools that you could use. We wanted these things to be the best possible tools available. Not only the best tools available, but we wanted it to be we wanted you to build applications as fast as possible with a really high level of quality. And that was the initial vision. And it actually took us about 20 months to go from that phone call into what I would say is the first delivery of that vision, because we're going to keep working on that, and that is Xamarin 2.0. We released it just 6 weeks ago. It is a culmination of the work of our entire team. We've been working very, very hard to deliver that to you. And let me share a few of the things that we shipped to you guys 6 weeks ago. The first one is Xamarin Studio. It was a full refresh of our IDE, and this time we started with a design, with a focus on design. We started with designers that actually prototype what the user interface would look like. We didn't ask developers, can you change this background? Can you polish this stuff up? Instead, we started from the other end. This is what we would like it to look like. And we built prototypes, interactive prototypes, to see how it worked. David Siegel, an amazing, amazing designer who's standing here on the front row, spent so many hours making sure that all of the little details were right. We had some initial designs, and then we iterated over and over and over again. We like to think that we threw actually a lot of prototypes out. We tried things out, didn't work, and we iterated until we got something nice. People are loving it, and I like to think that today Xamarin Studio is the Aaron chair of IDE environments. So that is Xamarin Studio. We just shipped it. Now, we understand that many of you are .NET developers, and your habitat today is Visual Studio. You use Windows, you use Visual Studio. There's no question that Visual Studio is an incredibly powerful IDE, and they have a fantastic ecosystem of developer tools. And we really didn't want you to feel like a penguin in Texas or a giraffe in Boston, although we do have giraffes in Boston, which have a rough time in the winter. So we didn't want you to feel that way, and so we finally completed our vision. So now you can develop Android and iOS applications right from Visual Studio. For iOS, you need to have a Mac computer sitting next to you. So whenever you're building with Visual Studio, you're going to have a Mac next to you, connected to your iPhone or your iPad. What is nice about this is that now you can use Visual Studio to maintain your entire solution. You could have all of your mobile applications, your Windows Phone app, your Android app, your iOS app, maybe even your backend web services built with Service Stack, perhaps, maybe with Azure. You might have a desktop application, so you control absolutely your entire solution from the IDE. So we're very happy with the support that we have for Visual Studio, and it kind of rounds up the story. The third piece is the thing that we got most excited about on those initial phone calls, and it's our component store. Building a good mobile application actually takes a lot of effort. Like Nat said, the bar today for a quality application is kind of high. You can't just throw some widgets in the screen, some views and some data input fields, and ship it to your customers. The bar for quality is very high now. And it takes some time. It takes some time to actually get that level of polish, get the right controls, get the right backend services in place. So what we wanted to make it very easy for you guys to go from not knowing anything to have a really high quality application. So we offer a lot of different things in our component store. You can see a few of the components that we have right there. We have general purpose libraries, so user interfaceless libraries. We have UI components, so you can spice up your application and make it look pretty. We have themes to style your application. If you're not an expert, you can style it very quickly. And we have tools for game developers. One of the couple of things I want to mention. Since we launched 6 weeks ago, there's over 2,000 developers using components. This statistic obviously is before this keynote, so I guess we'll probably need to add all 400 of you that took the course this week. Since our launch, only 6 weeks ago, we've added over 40 new components to our component store. And I'm going to show you a couple of those with a little bit of background story behind them. One of the things that we run a lot into people building point-of-sale applications, we have a lot of people building that sort of applications, was a signature pad. So people need to capture signatures. And typically what would happen if you were building this yourself, you would spend some quality time learning about graphics, about vectors, about how to interpolate vectors so it looks good, the signature on the screen, so you can capture data quickly, and so on. And we decided to put together a component that you could just drop into your application and get this thing done very quickly. This is one of the components that you get there. One of our partners, Shinobi Controls, makes, you cannot see this here. It doesn't do it justice, this screenshot. But Shinobi Controls does charting components. Now, you might be thinking, there's a million charting components in the world. What is different about Shinobi? I would like to recommend that you check out the Shinobi booth when here in the lounge after the keynote or this week to see it in action. But what they've done is the entire set of charts are rendered by the GPU. So what they do is that all of your data set, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 data points, they're dumped into the GPU. And the rendering of the graphics, the scaling of the graphics, the examination of the graphics, it's entirely driven by vectors and pixel shaders. And what that means is that they are the fastest and most interactive graphs that you've ever seen. They're amazing controls. And like I said, this is something that you have to see. You can't really appreciate on the screenshots. And the guys are here. We've also been working very close with the monogame and XNA community. As you guys know, XNA is an API for it's a low-level API for building games. And what we've done is we've ported Cocos 2D. Cocos 2D is a very popular framework for building educational applications, interactive applications, and games for iPhone. And what we've done is we've taken the Cocos 2D API and we've ported it entirely to run on XNA. What that means is that you can use the familiar constructs of Cocos 2D on iOS with the same API on iOS and Android, on Macintosh, on Windows RT, on Windows, on Ouya, and there's a couple more I can't remember. If you're interested about Cocos 2D and games, I recommend that you go to the Lightning Talks. They're going to have a presentation about both Cocos 2D and a very nice sample that we just licensed called Angry Ninjas, which is similar to other Angry applications you might have heard of. The code is entirely MIT X11, which means that you can take those assets, you can take that code, and you can build your own angry or happy application as you choose. So those are some of the UI components. I invite you to check out everything we have in the component store. On the back end, we actually have Microsoft Azure Mobile Services in there. Azure Mobile Services are very interesting because if you don't have an existing backend infrastructure, or if you're not a company that is exposing services already, you can use Azure Mobile Services to actually take all of the pain away of doing all your backend development. They handle authentication for you. They handle push notifications across all devices. So you use Azure, you publicly send notification to Azure, and they'll send that to Android, iOS, Windows, and whatever else can receive notifications. They have data storage, and it basically accelerates the time that it takes you to go from having a mobile app and an idea to having a backend infrastructure, right? So instead of having to build your mobile app and then having to install your own system, build your own databases, your own authentication, you can just reuse it from the start. There's a session about Azure Mobile Services here at Xamarin. So come and learn how you can integrate Azure Mobile Services with your mobile app. If you're more of a California kind of guy, you're probably going to go with Parse. Parse offers very similar services. You can store data on the cloud very easily. You can share it across devices, across servers. They also have a push notification server. What is very interesting about Parse is that they also integrate authentication with very popular authentication systems like Twitter and Facebook. So if you don't want to deal with any of the problems with authentication, you can use the Parse guys. Since we're about cross-platform and we want to make sure that you guys write the code once and you get the maximum possibility, the maximum exposure possible, we also got now the Dropbox component. You can use Dropbox to store your files, to store data in Dropbox, and have that data available on iOS and Android, on Windows, Windows RT, and everything else that you can think of. Think of it as iCloud, as a cross-platform iCloud storage system for your data. So it is very, very interesting. Since we launched, we have a lot of component vendors. You might recognize some of those names. And we are hoping to add many more towards the end of the year. We had about 100 new components in the pipeline. So we're going to keep adding those, and we're going to keep improving things. And the idea is that you can quickly put together an application, a really high-quality prototype, to either show your boss, to show a prospective client, and get your application published on the app stores very quickly. Now, I want to switch gears. This is what we've done so far. This is what we achieved so far. Now, I want to talk a little bit about building great mobile applications. So even if we give you a lot of these controls and we give you all of this foundation to start with, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that you want your application to be very responsive. When you're using a mobile application, your users sometimes are just going to spend a few seconds on the app, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes, right? I'm about to take the train, I bring up my phone, I check what's going on, and I put it back in, right? Or while I'm waiting for the doctor to see me, or my stylist, Richard, he's great, to wash my hair. So you want to make your applications responsive, because that's going to drive your ratings on the App Store. It's going to drive the emotional impact that the application has on your users, the engagement. And what we find is there are a couple of challenges. You need to deal with a few things. For instance, you might have networking delays. When you build mobile apps, you don't know. You cannot assume that the network is going to be reliable. The network can go down. The network might not be able to transfer the file completely. So you want to make your applications responsive at any point in time. You might be getting into an elevator. You might be chased by a wolf. So you want to take care of that. So you don't want to do the typical approach where you synchronously download something from the network and your application stops responding, right? You might have database delays, or you might be doing a lot of I/O, or you might be parsing a lot of data, and you need to store into a SQL database, right, on your application. You don't want to ever hang the user interface. Or you might be doing some Bitcoin mining on your phone, right? So while you're Bitcoin mining on your phone, you want the UI to be responsive and maybe do some trading with the Bitcoins. By the way, I introduced my own currency a few days ago. If you want to buy, I'm selling. And so those are the challenges. And let me show you a little graph to understand what is happening. What you see in this chart, there's three bars shown here. 16 milliseconds corresponds to 60 frames per second. The iPhone core animation framework refreshes the screen on the iPhone 60 times per second. That is the refresh rate of the iPhone. So if you want to have the optimal experience and you want your application to feel as nice as all the applications that Apple ships on the device, you want to be below that line, below that 16 millisecond line, right? Applications still look reasonably good at 32 milliseconds. That's 30 frames per second. They still look good. They're not a big deal. Once you get to 64 milliseconds, that's 15 frames per second. It starts to feel a little choppy. Now, at this point, you're thinking, well, that actually is going to take a lot of work. because some application just hangs for like 3 seconds, and that's just kind of unacceptable. So you don't want to do that. So what developers have to resort to today is to use callbacks and to use background processing. Here I'm showing a little snippet of an application that downloads tweets, downloads images, attachments from the images. And this is a very common site for people that have seen these kinds of applications. You have a callback, and then inside the callback, you do some work and some background processing, and then when it's finished, you call something else. It's been popularized by Node. You end up with this code that I call it an arrow, right? You have this cascade of things, right? And it becomes very obnoxious to actually propagate an error from the tip of the arrow or anywhere in the arrow to the higher levels, or reset the processing. So you end up with these very poor error messages. Like, well, if something happens here, just tell the user, hey, things failed, right? Like, I am guilty of this. My own tweet station application, you might have seen it. It has a little chicken. And it makes chicken noises. When I was deep down in my error handling, and if something happens, I just say, hey, there's network error. And that's not great error handling, because it turns out if you change your password somewhere else, right, that's not really a network error, but that's the way that I report it, right? Because I'm so deep down in callbacks that, propagating the data backup is just messy. So I just say, hey, network error, figure it out yourself. And if somebody ever asks, I'll tell, oh, you just need to log out and log in. That's poor error handling. And it's just caused because I was so deep down on some operation that it was difficult to propagate the error. So we're bringing to Xamarin products C# 5.0 async. Yep. Really, the credit goes to Microsoft for invading C# 5 async in the first place. The Don Syme of F# fame for bringing it to F# in the first place. Anders Helsberg, the incredible designer, for retrofitting that into the C# language and making it incredibly pleasant. And this is what the code in the previous slide would look like. It's very linear. It looks very linear. It's very easy to understand. And basically, the compiler does all the magic to rewrite the code. So we're very happy to have this. Now, well, I'm actually saying that we're introducing C# 5 async. We are actually introducing the whole upgraded stack of Xamarin. We're upgrading the entire Xamarin stack from the old Mono 2.10 to Mono 3.0. What that means is not only you get C# 5 async, you get our new garbage collector. It's a garbage collector that has many features that can be used by game developers to minimize pauses and to increase responsiveness for any interactive applications. We've upgraded the entire API from the old Silverlight-like subset of the API to the full .NET 4.5 API for the base class libraries. So it's a major, major upgrade. The other thing that this allowed us to do, and actually, if you go to the presentation on what is new on iOS and what is new on Android, you'll learn that that little bug that you've heard before about link, and you've seen that JIT method could not compile, those errors are gone. So we'll talk about that in my session. Thank you, thank you. The credit, of course, goes to my amazing compiler team, the amazing team that puts together a virtual machine on our static compilers. They came up with the solution. They came up with the technology. And it's something that we're very, very proud of. Now, let me tell you a little bit more. The other thing that we're introducing is finally we can introduce support for the F# language. Yep. There's a lot that can be said about F#. One of the things that I love the most about .NET when .NET was published back in 2000 was that it wasn't really a virtual machine designed for a single language. It was a system designed for multiple languages. So while C# is a language that I love, and of course I have I have an emotional attachment to it because I've spent so many years building the compiler. I've always loved other languages. I love what people are experimenting in other spaces. I love functional language. I love scripting languages. And this is our first step to expand the language support, because we understand that while a lot of you love C#, there's other people that have a different set of problems that they need to express. They need different kinds of solutions that they need to express their problems in different ways. F# is that language for those people. It's a language that puts an emphasis on functional programming and writing short functions. They've eliminated null from the language. So you've probably seen applications that crash because you have a null, you pass a null and you get a null reference exception. It's very hard to get those errors in F# because F# just doesn't really make it easy to use. And it forces you to handle all of those conditions. It's very interesting, the statistics about F# applications. They reduce a lot error handling, error checking because of the way that the language is built. David Siegel here, like I said, is a designer, but he's also a functional developer, and he's always pushing us to think more about functional use in our code. He loves functional programming, and every time I see one of his scripts, he writes these beautiful, beautiful scripts in F#. It's just a delight to look at these things. And also remember, async was actually invented in F# and then transplanted to C#. So if you want to use F#, you can now use it. If you want to keep using C#, you can keep using C#. Now, let me talk a little bit about designers. We have probably the most advanced Android designer out there. It's better than what Google offers. And of course, it's in a much better looking IDE than what Google offers. And it runs in a much more powerful IDE in Visual Studio than what Google offers. But we put a lot of work into this designer. It's a beautiful designer. And I think that people really enjoyed creating Android user interfaces with our designer. But we figured, but our story was not complete. As you guys know, up until now, you had to use Xcode to build your user interfaces for iOS. So today, we're introducing our iOS designer. Yeah. We're very excited. And like I said, it's all about delighting developers. So whenever you see something, it's like, shouldn't you guys do? We should, and we will. So whenever you're thinking, hey, I'm not delighted, send me an email. I'll make sure we delight you. No. No. I'm going to work on that. So, would you guys like to see it? Yeah. All right. I'm sorry? Oh. It's coming. Remember, if you think Xamarin should, it's coming. So we're gonna show that. I mean, you guys have been telling us your integration with Xcode is not great. And dragging and dropping outlets and actions, like, what is an outlet? What is an action? Some of you have pointed out that since the beginning of time, man has asked the question, what the hell is an outlet? So maybe you guys don't want to see it. Oh, you want to see it? All right. Could we switch to my desktop? So I'm going to start Xamarin Studio. And what we figured we would do, is we're going to run a little contest here to see which platform is the most popular, right? So I'm going to build a little application today to do some voting. So I'm going to go around the conference, and you're going to vote for the application. At the end of the conference, we're going to get some results. So that is the excuse to actually show you a couple of interesting things. Now, to show you some of the really neat features, we're going to start with a pre-built template. Now, this works perfectly fine with a standard program, but I want to show you a couple of things that are very interesting. The first thing is that our iOS designer works with native iOS storyboards. So everything that is supported by iOS storyboards is supported by Xamarin Studio. Everything that you have on an iOS storyboard is there. So it's a native UI designer for Xamarin. So when I double-click on the Xamarin on the storyboard file, I'll get a designer surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a navigation controller. So I'm going to drag the navigation controller into the screen. As you can see, that looks very pretty. Very, very nice. And I'm going to show you a couple of features. The first thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to add some code behind this screen fill here. So to add code behind this thing, I'm going to need a custom class that will represent that particular screen. So I'm going to go here to the identity tab. I'm going to show you this. So here, where you see the identity, I'm going to use a name here. I'm going to type voting results controller. Right? I'm just going to do that. And when I do that, the IDE automatically created this file for me, the voting results controller. Right? That was automatically created for me. So let's take a look at that file. This is what it looks like. Following the advice of Scott Henselman, I used a big font. I hope you can see it. So that's an empty class, not much to it. So let's go back to the storyboard. And what I'm going to do is the idea is I want to visualize the votes. I want to visualize the votes that I'm going to be displaying. So the idea for my application is I'm going to have the visualization of the votes, and I have a button where you can press it, and it's going to transition to a place where I can actually select the platform, and then you guys are going to vote. That is the general idea of this thing, right? So we prototyped that on the notebooks that we gave you today, so you can actually draw them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add here the visualization, and this is why I used a pre-built solution, because my team has built me a pie chart. We're going to use a pie chart to represent this. So let me show you the source code for the pie chart just very quickly. This is a custom view. A pie chart view is a UI view. It's a native iOS UI view. This is the implementation of it. I just want to point you to this section here. This is a property called CSV names. And what I'm doing is I'm setting the attribute browsable. And what that means is that that property in the component will be visible in the designer. Right? Then we have another one there. So let's go back to the designer. And you'll notice that my solution has my main application and my library. And whenever I add a library to my project, Xamarin Studio will scan that library for any built-in components and add those components to my toolbox. So I can, yep. So you guys have probably seen this. I'm adding my component to the screen. This is going to be my pie chart. And that's a pie chart. Now, some of you that have seen this, well, let me show you one thing first. Those properties that I showed you showed up here in the designer, right? The section names and the section values. Remember those two things I showed you in the source code? So they're showing right there in the toolbox. Now, so that's a pie chart, and we're gonna list a couple of platforms. We're gonna list here Android, we're gonna list iOS, and we're gonna list Windows. Those are gonna be the elements of my pie chart. And I'm gonna get some initial data here. So I'm gonna say there's one vote for each one of those platforms. And pay attention to what's gonna happen on the screen now, because I think this is very interesting, and it's something that Xcode cannot do. Which is so we've taken your component, we've compiled the component, we're running it in a sandbox inside the designer, and it's rendering the surface with live data in the designer. So you can customize your controls, you can make changes to your controls in the property editor, and the changes reflect immediately on the screen. So that's the first step. Now, let's take a look at we're going to add a button here to cast your vote. So we're going to say here, vote. And you can use either default text or you can use attributed strings in iOS. I'm just going to go with this for now. Now, so for the voting, what we're going to need is whenever I click on this button, I want to go to the voting page. Now, let's write a little bit of code here first. I'm going to add a method to the voting result controller so I can cast my vote. I'm going to say public void cast vote int candidate. Now, what should this do? Well, this really should update the pie chart. So let me go back here, and I said, well, how do I get access to this pie chart? Well, let me create a variable name for this. So I'm going to say this pie chart is going to be represented by the identifier pie chart. Let me show you that. So I just type in pie chart here, OK? So once I do that, I can reference that field from my source code. Let me show you what actually happened behind the scenes. It doesn't matter, but I'm going to show you what happened behind the scenes so you know what's happening. The designer automatically generated in this code behind file a pie chart variable of the pie chart view component, and it created this thing called outlet. You don't need to know about this. So whenever I cast a vote, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to say pie chart, right? I got code completion, very nice. Of, I get IntelliSense, so I can index my pie chart component of candidate. And I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to increase the count. Very simple, right? So what are we going to do next? Well, now we're going to add our actual voting. So for that, I'm going to use a segmented control. Oh, well, first we need to add the screen. So let me add this puppy. So we're going to add this puppy here. All right, let me just move it here. And let me show you a little neat feature of the iOS designer. Just like, since we're a native designer, you can actually control-click from the vote button into the new controller. And notice what's going to happen to this controller. Look at the top. It offers me whether I want to get a push seg, a modal seg, or a custom seg. I'm going to go with a push seg, which does the nice navigation controller animation. So it's going to shift the UI out, and it's going to push this thing. So as you can see, it immediately added a navigation bar at the top, right? So it's going to nicely transition there. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add a segmented controller to cast our vote. So I'm going to add the segment control here. All right? Very nice. We're actually, since we have 3 platforms, I'm going to change the number of segments to 3. And I'm going to resize this puppy to be this size. Now, let me get some data in here. So I'm going to say the first one was Android. The second one is going to say iOS. And the third one is going to say Windows. All right, that looks fine. Now, there's been a lot of talk about rigging elections in Latin America. My country is famous for having sophisticated the art of rigging an election. I actually worked on rigging election prevention. Ask me one day, and I'll tell you everything about how my country rigs the elections. But in the meantime, we figured, what is the best mechanism to avoid having the election rigged? A signature pad. Yes, I know what you're thinking. That makes sense. So I could go and get it from the component store, but you know how demos that need the internet always fail. So I said, no, I'm not using the internet. So what I'm going to do is I already downloaded this to my machine. I already have the signature pad component, so I'm going to add it to the project. And now my component is listed here in the right side of the screen, on the left side of the screen. I have my component there. And just like custom controls, as soon as I add my component, it's added to the toolbox. So now I can access this new component right there on the UI. So let me add the signature pad here into the screen. We're getting a little bit of alignment here. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to add a button here to cast my vote. And those little things help me actually set that thing. So now that I have this, when I press that button, what I want to do is to update the values on the pie chart and call this register vote method that I had defined before. So how do I do that? Well, I need to pass the instance of my first page, and we should not call this root view controller. We should call this voting results. That's better. So what I'm going to do is iOS provides you with a mechanism to actually prepare the data that you're going to pass to the next controller in your source code. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go to the voting results, and I'm going to add a method. So I just type override, and when I press spacebar, it shows me all the methods that I can override. It's very nice. So I know that it's something starting with seg, so I type the word seg, and it says prepare for seg. So I'm going to pick that puppy. So I added my method here. So this method is called just before the seg is executed. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pass the state to the next object. Now, to do that, actually, I forgot to do one thing. I need to also give this object a class, a name. So I'm going to call this the vote controller. And again, as soon as I tap enter, you'll see that it appears here. The source code is added there. So there it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my results controller. I'm going to say the target is actually the seg. And there's a property here called, now, as you can see, there's a lot of properties here that I can access, sorted by name. If I press Control Space, it actually resorts that list not by name, but it sorts it by class, so you can get the most derived type information. So I'm going to select here the destination view controller, right? And I'm going to cast that as a, what do I call it, vote controller. OK, so now I have my target. Now I can access the child just before it's presented on the screen. So I'm going to pass an instance to myself. For this to work, I need to declare a variable here for my parent. So I'm going to say vote results controller parent. I'm going to call this public, right? Whoop, not a breakpoint there. I'm going to make this a P. I'm sorry? What? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Very astute. And I guess you guys saw it because it was red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this puppy. And I'm going to say target the parent. Oh, there it is, this. So that's the way that I tell my child, here's your parent. OK? So now that I have that, I can go back to my child, to my vote controller. And I want to do something when the user clicks. So I'm going to go back to my storyboard. And how we're going to do it? Well, what we're going to do is when we click here, we want to access this property. So we're going to give it a name, just like we did before. So we're going to call this the platform selector. So again, when I tap enter, it automatically lets me reference this control from the source code. And you'll be very happy to know that you don't need to do click and drag to do anything. I'm just going to double click on this button. And it takes me to the source code. And it adds a method. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, when they click that button, I'm going to say parent.cast vote. And I'm going to say platform selector. Dot, which one should that be? It's selected something. Selected segment, right? So that looks about right. So let me run this application. Compiling, running. OK, there it is. It has my initial data, 111. So I'm going to cast a vote. I'm going to do here my signature. And I'm just going to cast a vote for Windows. Well, that casted it, but it didn't pop the controller, right? Let's see if it actually made the change. Well, it made the change, but it didn't return. So let me show you how you add a little bit of attention to detail. So what we're going to do is when you touch the button, we're going to actually say navigation controller, which is my navigation controller. I'm going to say just pop the view controller, which is just going to shift it back. So this is just the little attention of details that you expect from me. And now when I cast my vote, this time I'm going to vote for iOS. Beautiful. Did you see how it homogenizes the curves? Look at that. Oh, beautiful. There it is. And well, this is available today on Xamarin Studio. We're hard at work to bring it also to Visual Studio. Remember, you still need that Mac next to you, even if you're using Visual Studio. So to recap, today we are announcing the availability of async. We're announcing the availability of F#, and we're announcing the availability of the iOS Designer. There's sessions on all of these things, so I hope to see you in the sessions. Thank you very much.
All right. What do you guys think? Do you like what you saw? All right. We're not done yet. I told you at the beginning of the day that at Xamarin, our goal was to delight developers every step of the way to their app. And we know the #1 pain in building mobile apps is how do I build a great cross-platform app? And obviously, we've solved that problem. So, but what's next? What's the next problem? You built your app. Well, let's think about the life cycle. You design your app, you build it, and then you need to test it. And on mobile, quality is an especially hard problem because it's not like there's just one type of mobile device, right? There's just loads and loads of different operating systems, hardware manufacturers, versions of operating systems, form factors, languages. The matrix, the permutation matrix, is huge. There was this tweet that went around last week that listed the 27 different screen sizes that Samsung alone has in their product lineup. This is only 20. We couldn't fit them all on the slide, actually. So a friend of mine is a guy named Mike Shaver. We've known. I actually met him the same way I met Miguel on IRC in like 1995. And today he's the director of mobile engineering at Facebook. And he's had that job, I think, for about a year. And at the end of last year, I was having lunch with him. And I said, Mike, I mean, this Android testing problem is huge. What are you guys doing? How are you solving it? And he said, well, when I first took the job, I was looking to pick the most common Android devices and then discovered that the top 100 devices only covered about 1/3 of our users. So what does that mean? It means like the most popular Android phone is only like 9% of the market. So if you're a company that wants to support a lot of devices, you have to test on literally hundreds of devices if you want to reach a lot of users. OK, so that's the first problem. Lots of devices, lots of form factors, lots of OS versions, manufacturers making tweaks, especially in Android. OK, the second problem is something that we've been talking about today, which is that on mobile, quality is more important. The bar is a little higher. And I think there's 3 reasons for that. The first is that mobile users are on the go. They're standing in line or they're waiting for the bus, and you only have a few seconds to impress them. So don't blow it with a bug, right? If you do, you're going to get a bad rating in the App Store. People will talk about it, and they'll go on to the next app in the same category that has better ratings. And even if your app's not in the App Store, if it's an enterprise internally deployed app, engagement goes down, and your project fails. The third reason I think quality is especially important on mobile is the regression, the issue with regressions in an incredibly short release cycle. A lot of our customers have told us that they were used to like 6-month release cycles before they started building mobile apps, and now those have been shrunk sometimes to 6 weeks or less. So mobile is really fast-moving. You have to keep up. And that means you need a really great process for catching regressions. OK, so what are our options? Well, there's unit testing, right? We all know unit testing. You write unit tests. They're great because you can run them really quickly. You can run them after every single, you change a line of code, you run your unit test, you see what broke, you fix it immediately. You can set it up in continuous integration. What's wrong with unit tests are that they just can't cover all your code, right? You're usually testing your libraries. Our customers tell us they can get about 20% code coverage with unit tests. All right, so there's manual testing. This is the #1 form of testing used in mobile today. And it's usually the person who built the app just installs it on their phone or their tablet, and they try to use it, they find a bug, and they fix it. If you're a little more sophisticated, maybe you hire a team and somewhere in the world, and they're sending you a spreadsheet every night or at the end of every week with your bugs. Really common. If you want to go a little bit further, beta testing is actually great. There's really wonderful apps like Test Flight and Hockey App you can use to distribute early versions of your app to hundreds of users and get feedback. It's really realistic, right? Because you simulate actual user behavior. It's not even simulated, they're using it. But it's got problems. It's not as consistent. You have to have hundreds of users who are willing to do this to start with. That's a problem. And of course, the feedback cycle is long. You don't find a bug within an hour of introducing it. So the question is there something better? Is there something in the sweet spot where you get really realistic tests, but they're really fast, so you can catch bugs immediately? And there is. It's called automated UI testing. And the idea of automated UI testing is that you write a script that interacts with your app exactly like a user would do through the user interface. It's sort of like having a robot do your manual testing for you. So we think automated UI testing is really in the sweet spot. And so when we started hearing about the pain people were having about testing, we thought we'd ask, what are you doing? What automated UI testing tools are you using? What should we integrate with? Who should we partner with? What's the best automated UI testing tool on the planet? And it turns out the answer is nothing. Not only does no one use automated UI testing, but in fact, only 8% of the 300 developers we surveyed use any form of testing product on mobile. People are just doing it manually. It's crazy. This was OK when mobile was like new and in its infancy, and we're all cowboys, and that's cool. But it's grown up a little bit now. People have higher expectations. It's becoming the primary form of interface to a lot of software now. So OK, then we wanted to know why. Why is no one using these tools? So we assigned one of our developers to the very terrible and arduous process of trying every testing product that we could find. And he spent a month on it. It's Jason Smith, who's over here. He lost a lot of hair. Still got a lot left, though. And here's what we found. First, setting up a test lab is really hard. It's super expensive. One of our customers told us that they spend their budget monthly just for Android devices for their test lab is $8,000. So it's super expensive just to get your lab set up, and then it's difficult. You got to maintain it, et cetera. Second, writing scripts is pretty tough. Most of the solutions are cumbersome. They've got these drag and drop things or weird languages. They're not any good. And then once you've written them, the tests are fragile, right? They usually use image recognition or gesture recording to record your tests. So if you change your UI a little bit, you rearrange something or change a label, all the tests break and you stop using them. And then finally, these are not delightful products, right? They have, I mean, not to be unnice, but they have terrible user interfaces. So we asked ourselves, as developers, what do we want to use, right? What would be the ideal testing product? OK, well, first of all, it's got to test your app at the UI level. And it should be super easy to get started. It should take only a few minutes, right? You shouldn't have to set up a test lab and install virtual machines on a lot of computers and get a lot of CDs out and all the stuff that Jason had to do. And then it's got to test on real hardware, because real hardware is different from the simulator. You'll find different bugs. We tell all our customers, you got to start running on real hardware from day one. We have a lot of customers, unfortunately. The reason we say that now is that we've seen what happens if you don't. You spend months developing your app in the simulator, you get ready to release, you build for a real device, and you find out, oh, there's a memory limit, right? So test on real devices and test on hundreds of them. It should be resilient to small changes in the UI. So if you rearrange things or add a feature, localize, that sort of thing, your tests keep working. And finally, it should be really fun to use. So I'm really proud to announce the latest product from Xamarin, the Xamarin Test Cloud. This is the world's best tool for automated UI testing. It is a cloud service that you can use to automatically test your app on hundreds of real devices. So instead of telling you about it, I'm just going to show you. All right. Now, to make it easy to get started, we've given Xamarin Test Cloud a web interface. Of course, you can integrate it with your continuous integration system, TFS, et cetera. But let's just get going. Pull up the login screen. All right, this is Chrome. Just to make it easier to see, I'm just going to go full screen. Whoops, that was not the right full screen mode. OK, I done good. All right, so now let's log in. OK, the first thing you see when you log into Xamarin Test Cloud is you see a list of all the apps that you're currently testing. You might recognize a couple of these. These two are the pre-built apps from Xamarin, our employee directory app, which is a phone app, and field service, which is a tablet. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to upload a new version of the employee directory app to test. So I just hit this Upload New Test button. And then the first thing I have to do is it's an Android app, so I'm going to select an APK. So I just upload the APK. Now, because this is an Android app, Xamarin Test Cloud recognizes, it's an APK, and so it's asking me which Android devices I want to run on. And I can sort of go through here and click, select which ones I want to run on. Or I can just pull up this drop-down here and say, let's run on the top 30 phones. Okay. And then I have two options for how I actually want to test. Sort of zoom in here. I can upload some actual handwritten test scripts that verify the business functionality of my app. Or we have something called Xamarin App Explorer, which tells Xamarin Test Cloud to generate tests for you. So that's what we're going to do in this case. We don't have any tests yet. OK, so it's uploading my app, and the test run is going to start. And what App Explorer is doing right now is it's using one of the phones as a reference device, and it's just exploring the user interface. Right? So it's trying to visit every tab and navigate to every screen. It's pushing all the buttons. If it hits a dead end, it starts over. It starts the test over and relaunches the app. And then it types things into the various fields and so on. And then while it does that, it records a script, a test script. And then it's going to run that test script on all the other devices so we can compare how the devices run next to each other. Okay? Now, this can take a few minutes. It can take hours. It depends on how big your app is, and how many devices you're running on, and so on. So we don't have to sit here. I've pre-cached some results, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So let's just click on this test run. And here you see the summary. This is the result of the App Explorer run. The first thing I notice is there's a lot of green on the screen, so my app is not doing too bad. There is one failure. It's red. I'm going to have to investigate. And then down the side here, we have some stats. So we spent 3 hours and 21 minutes of device time. Obviously, automated testing is faster than a human, so that would probably be some multiple for human test time. We performed almost 800 gestures, and there was one crash, so that failure was a crash. All right, so now down the left side of the screen here, if we want to get into some more detail about what's going on, I can show you this. This is a list of all the tests that Xamarin Test Cloud performed on the app. And these are automatically generated names, right? So login button pressed in login screen, OK button pressed in need help screen. So if I want to see what happened during the test run, all I have to do is just click on this test. And Xamarin Test Cloud shows me all the devices that I was running on here. These are actual screenshots of the device running on real, non-jailbroken hardware. It's awesome. It's like you have this whole test lab. And in fact, there's only a few of them, so let me zoom out. So here you can see all 30 devices that we ran these tests on. All right, now down the side, you'll notice each test is actually made of multiple steps. So here, I'll show those to you. So in this case, we have app launched, and then we enter test user into the username field, and then password into the password entry, and then we hit the login button. And it seems there was some kind of error that occurred there. And then we want the employee screen to appear. OK. So what's really neat is if I click on each of these steps, keep an eye on what happens over here. you can actually step through the app running on the device. Isn't that awesome? And if I want to, I can pick one device. Let's pick the Galaxy S3. I have one of these, actually. And if I just use the arrow key, I can just watch the app run just on this device, stepping through it step by step. It's cool. It's like you can simulate the run. I don't have to have any of these devices on my desk. I can watch my app run on all these devices and see how it looks. I'm glad you like it. OK. Now, what kind of problems can I find? Well, right next to the S3, we have a Galaxy S2. And you can tell, even without zooming in, that it looks different, right? My app doesn't look quite the same on it. There's this kind of white thing here instead of black. It looks like Android's a different Android theme or version. As we step through, we can see test user. Well, if we click on this one, we can actually see we have a really big problem here, right? Because the test user, maybe you can see here, the test user string is like white on white, right? OK, this isn't like a crash. My app didn't crash and a test assertion didn't fail. But I'm not shipping this, right? This is terrible. So I just found a visual bug just by getting to look at what my app looks like on a device. And when we've shown this to people so far, when we've had customers use this already, they said, well, I've never seen my app running on a Kindle Fire, and it looks terrible. I've got to do something about that. So you can find visual problems like this. Now, remember we had this little lightning bolt here. This indicates that when we press the login button, something went wrong. So if I click on that, and then I scroll down the device list here, I see there's the Droid 4, which looks like it's on the home screen. And there's a little red icon. This indicates that this app actually crashed, right? That's how I got to the home screen. If I want to figure out what happened that caused the crash, I just click down here, and I get the stack trace. And I have a null reference exception. So we also provide a full device log, so you can see every action that the test run used and exactly what happened on each of the devices. OK, so that's pretty much the App Explorer. It's a really good way to get started testing your apps, but it's not really a substitute for handcrafted tests that test your app's business functionality. You want to write tests that say, if you're Instagram, for example, you want your basic test that runs continuously to be upload a picture, choose a filter, right? Something like that, or like someone else's photo. So I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like. If we go back to our apps list, we're going to look at this field service app, which is a tablet app, and I'm going to show it to you on iPad. And actually, before we get into the test run, we sort of saw this before, but I didn't talk about it. This is your app overview page, and this shows you all the stuff that's happening with your app over time, which is really neat. So I see my last few test runs here, and I can see that I'm doing better. I've got more green each time. That's good. And then I've actually got stats on the number of tests that have been written, and we're writing more and more tests, which is positive, and on the size of my app. You know, this is really important. You want to keep track of the size of your app and how big a download it is for people. If you're adding too many resources, it gets too big. So this may be the only place people see this information. And we also track the memory usage of the app, and so we know the peak memory usage of the app on any device for that test run. So we can look at that over time. If you start to see memory usage going up, you'll know maybe something's going wrong. All right, let's look at the field service app test run. This summary looks really similar to the last one. We have a few more failures. 13 failures, but only 6 crashes. So that means we have some failures here that aren't crashes, right? Because we have test assertions that are failing in our custom-written tests. And then we have these orange ones here. These are slow tests. OK, what's a slow test? Well, here's how it works. Every time you run a test on any device, we time how long it takes. And then if one of your tests start getting slow, like visiting the screen used to take 200 milliseconds, and now it starts to take like 800 milliseconds, we just give you a little warning. You can investigate if there's a problem there. So we compare to historical data. All right, so let's look at these tests. The first one here is login with valid user. It's got a check mark. That means it succeeded. So if we take a look at it here, the iPads again. And it starts off, it's written in the simple declarative language, which I'm going to tell you more about in a second. It starts off saying, given I am on the login screen, which I am, and then I log in as Xamarin user, then I should go to the assignment screen. So this is what it looks like when you're logged in, right? The next test failed. It's called login with invalid user. And it looks like there were 7 failures. So it says, given that I'm on the login screen, when I log in as invalid user, I should probably zoom in for you guys. then I should be informed of a login failure. So when I click this, it failed on all the devices. So this is not a device-specific problem. This is some kind of problem with my code, right? And I can already tell. I don't have to do anything. I already tell what went wrong. I'm logged in. I gave an invalid user, and I'm logged in. So there's some regression in my login validation code here, and I'm able to log into apps even with an invalid login. So I better look at what changed in that code recently. OK, that's Xamarin Test Cloud. What do you think? There's one more little feature I want to show you. In addition to testing for failures, we can actually we help you with performance a little bit. So we monitor the memory usage of your app while it's running. I kind of blazed through this here. But down the sidebar of the app, you've got some information about the device that you're running on. And then here in the lower right-hand corner, we have this chart which shows the memory usage of the app on this particular device during this test run, right? So this is really, really cool because as I move left and right on here, I can see my memory usage and where it peaks. And then I have this gray bar that indicates where I am right now in this step of the test. So as I move through the tests, the gray bar moves. So if there's a memory spike, I can figure out what caused it. Thanks very much. And there's one more feature I want to show. Actually, there's two. I forgot one. Sorry about that. We'll go back to it. But Miguel told you about the importance of your app not hanging on the main thread and causing the frames per second to stutter or anything like that. Well, we found a way to measure this. We can measure the responsiveness of your UI thread, and we can show it to you. So let me zoom in so you can really see it. So we measure as your app runs how long it takes the UI thread to respond. And so if you hang and then your app is therefore hanging, we can show you if you get dropped below 15 frames a second, or even worse, if your app does some synchronous operation that takes a second or so, you're going to know about it. This is a bug. In the mobile world, hanging is a bug. It shouldn't happen. So we're going to help you find these problems really, really easily. So I'm really, really excited about that. The last thing I'm going to show, I forgot to show earlier, so I got to go back over here. Sorry about that. Is that when we looked at this test run with this failure here, it was the Droid 4. You remember it, let's see, it crashed when I hit the login button. That app crashed. Well, one of the things that's really nice to know is that that's a problem, but it's not my biggest problem necessarily because this app is fairly far down this device is fairly far down the list. We sort devices in market share order. So we have a real-time feed of device market share. And so if your Galaxy S3 is crashing, it's got 9.9% of the worldwide market share. You better get on that immediately. Your Droid 4 is 1%. May be important to you if you've got huge reach, but you can prioritize your issues this way. We think this is really exciting, and we're going to be able to slice and dice that data by region, too. OK, so that is Xamarin Test Cloud. 4 things. We find visual problems. We find crashes, we can find code regressions, and we monitor performance for you. How do you like it? I said that I was going to tell you about how the test scripts work in Xamarin Test Cloud. And for that, we're using a system called Calabash. Calabash is amazing. I know some of you are familiar with it. It is the most widely used open source framework for automated UI testing in mobile. It's an open source tool. It allows you to write these beautiful, simple declarative tests. They look a lot like the steps that you just saw up here, and they can test your app in an automated way. Calabash was written by Jonas and Carl at Less Painful. We're so happy to be working with them. They're here at the conference. I hope you get to meet them. In fact, Carl and Jonas are giving a talk on Wednesday at 11:15 where you can learn all about Calabash. It's in one of our TBA slots. So Wednesday at 11:15. And there will be a lightning talk by them tonight, or at the end of the day, so you can get a quick overview of Calabash if you're interested. And one final announcement. When Carl and Jonas give that lightning talk tonight, they won't be doing it as Less Painful employees because Xamarin acquired Less Painful today. So We are so happy and proud to be welcoming Carl and Jonas to the Xamarin family. I hope they're right here in the front row. I hope you get to meet them all, or meet them here today. So, okay, let's recap. It was really busy. Before we recap, Xamarin Test Cloud's in beta today. We've got a lot of great customers, and you can sign up at xamarin.com/testcloud. So what did we see today? Well, we saw Xamarin Test Cloud, the best automated UI testing tool in the world for mobile. We saw a beautiful UI designer. Did you like the UI designer? We're bringing C# 5 async to all of our products, and we're supporting F# on all platforms, and all of this is available today. You can download the betas and alphas and sign up for the beta of Xamarin Test Cloud. We're so happy with all this. We have poured our hearts into this, and this is the team that did it. Give these guys a big round of applause. At the beginning of the morning, I told you the story of how Xamarin was born. Well, today we're 22 months old. We're a toddler, and we're just getting started. Thank you very much.